in Beaumont, California at a healing crusade. And pray for our pastor and Esther as they're over there. So we're going to continue this morning. A couple months ago, I did a study, one of Pastor Richard Ruby, Sunday schools from a couple years ago, and it was called The Waymaker. So we're going to continue along those lines this morning. So I'll need a couple scriptures. We'll need our opening scripture, which is going to be John 3, 1 through 8. We'll need John 3, 1 through 8. This morning, any volunteers? Vicki, if you'll get that for us. We will also need a longer portion of scripture, so don't be scared to volunteer, but hopefully you'll be confident with your reading, amen. It's going to be Genesis 20, 1 through 14. Coco, if you'll get that. And then we will need Genesis 20, verse 2. Just 20, verse 2. Ruben, if you'll get that. And then Genesis 20, 10 through 13. We'll need someone to get that as well. Manny, if you'll get that. So, the Waymaker. So we were looking at this reality that we serve a God, amen, that many times it may seem like God is not at work, but behind the scenes you find out that God is always at work. Okay, He's always doing something. He's not just idly standing by watching as things play out in the earth, but He is active and He is moving in the earth. He's moving in the circumstances that we are facing today. He's moving in each of our lives on an individual basis as well. So John 3, 1 through 8.
1 through 8? 1 through 8?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him." Jesus answered and said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven." Nicodemus said to them, "How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born?" Jesus answered, "Most assuredly I say to you, unless one is born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but cannot tell where it comes from and where it goes. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit."
Okay, so here we see this interaction between Nicodemus and Jesus. Many of you know this passage of Scripture. It's not an unfamiliar passage by any means. What you see here is Jesus presents this concept or this reality that a man must be born again if he's going to see the kingdom of heaven. And Nicodemus responds to him, and it's not a smart aleck remark. You know, we see it and we're like, "Oh, come on, Nicodemus, how do you not understand what Jesus means by this?" But you have to understand at this point in time, this was not something Nicodemus would have been familiar with. Okay, so he hears these words and he said, well, how is this even possible? I mean, is a man supposed to enter his mother's womb and be born again? I mean, that was the only way he could make sense of it. That wasn't a remark that was made, you know, in you know, Nicodemus, you know, responding like, "Oh, Jesus, you don't know what you're talking about. That's silly. That's stupid." That's not what he was doing. Well, he's really trying to figure this out and understand what Jesus is saying. And Jesus tells him, you know, the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but you can't tell where it comes from and where it goes. Okay, what he's telling him is you don't see this. This isn't a birth like, you know, a mother giving birth to a baby. It's not something you're going to witness like right in front of your face, but you will see the effects of this. When somebody is born again, you will see the effects of that play out in their life. Okay, that's a reality. Like I said, we understand that being saved, being born again. You know, that statement, it makes sense to us. But at the end of the day, you don't really see all that's transpiring. Okay, you don't see what God is dealing with people about. You don't see the conviction that is on someone's heart during an altar call. You don't see the conviction when somebody is playing games, or somebody is doing something, or God is trying to draw them back. You don't see all those things taking place. But nevertheless, that's what's going on. So we looked at the reality, that, I talked briefly about conspiracy theories, and I'm not gonna go deep into that. There's the idea, that behind the scenes, that there's powers of evil that are at work in the earth, okay? There are groups that, if I say the names, if I say Freemasons, there are thoughts that come to people's minds, or the Illuminati, the World Economic Forum, okay? And I personally believe that the NBA has a conspiracy against the Phoenix Suns, okay? I don't know if you've been a fan of the Phoenix Suns for a long time, but I've been watching them ever since they lost to the Bulls in the 90s, and I'm pretty convinced there was a couple times we should have come away with the title, but we didn't, okay? So that's my own personal belief, conviction. But are there evil people in the world? Yes. Are there people trying to manipulate what's going on in the world for evil? Yes. Yes, absolutely. But see, Psalm 2 tells us, that evil men, they'll gather together. They'll try to stop what God's doing. And God just looks at it and he just finds it laughable. It doesn't mean anything to him like it can mean to us. Sometimes we'll look at it, we'll be overwhelmed, like frustrated, like, why is this happening? And God's just sitting there like, they can do what they want. But I'm going to accomplish my will. That's what God says. It's not going to get in the way of what I'm going to do. Okay, so this Sunday school is about the fact that we serve a God that is a way maker. This Sunday school that Pastor Ruby came up with, it was inspired by a song. Many of you probably know it. It's called Waymaker, and the bridge of that song, the lyrics say, even when I don't see it, you're working, and even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. Okay, even when I don't see it. Most of what God does is undoubtedly not going to be seen by us. Okay, we're not going to, in this life, we're not going to probably grasp the whole picture of all that was taking place, of all that God was doing in the earth. Okay, we looked briefly at the story of Lazarus and how, Jesus, he's there, he's teaching, he's ministering, and he's handed a note. Hey, this note says, hey, Lazarus is sick. He's ill. He's deathly ill. And he just looks, listens, here's the message, and he just sets it to the side. And continues doing what he's doing, and we know that the story continues, and that a couple days later, here Lazarus is now dead. Okay, and now Jesus is still taking his time to get to Lazarus. And as he's going there, he's greeted by Martha and Mary. These are the sisters. Okay, and they come to him. If you would have been here, our brother wouldn't be dead. If you would have responded when we brought this issue to you in the first place, he wouldn't have died. And we don't know what spirit it was said, and we don't know, was it, with sorrow or was there frustration? You ever get a text message from somebody and you're kind of like, what do they mean by this? It's kind of hard to understand. Is this person mad at me, or are they just telling me something, or what's going on? So when we read this, we don't know. We don't know if the emotions were running high. I mean, I'd imagine, losing your brother, a family member, I'd imagine that there was some emotion behind these words. But nevertheless, this is the reality, that they didn't see what was going on. All they knew is that Lazarus was dead. They didn't see everything else taking place. Okay, as the story progresses, Jesus, he comes to the tomb, and they're still, like, you don't want, he's been dead 4 days now, it's no use. And not only is he dead, it stinks in there. Okay, he's dead. He's dead. And we know he steps up there and he tells them, open it up. Open it up anyways. Okay, and he tells Lazarus, he speaks. He tells him, come forth. And here comes Lazarus from the dead. Okay, and what transpires that day is there's people there that otherwise weren't really sure about Jesus. They weren't really like, oh yeah, I'm going to follow Jesus. They didn't really know if they believed or not. But because of what they saw that day, it says that many believed in him. Okay, and that's what was going on. We look at it like, there's no redeeming this situation. There's no real hope that can be found in this. There's nothing good that can come out of this. Lazarus is dead. But not only now is Lazarus not dead, but now there are people that have seen what Jesus can do, and now they believe. Now they believe in him. Okay, so that is what we looked at the last time. We're going to move forward today. We're going to look at the unseen hand of God when we fail. So I'm going to need Genesis 20, 1 through 14 now.
And Abraham journeyed from there to the south and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur and stayed in Gerar. Now Abraham said of Sarah his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, indeed, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will you slay a righteous nation also? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocence of my hands I have done this. And God said to him in a dream, yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart, for I also withheld you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now therefore restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. So Abimelech rose early in the morning, called all his servants, and told all these things in their hearing. And the men were very much afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? How have I offended you, that you have brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? You have done deeds to me that ought not to be done. Then Abimelech said to Abraham, what did you have in view that you have done this thing? And Abraham said, because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife. But indeed she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house that I said to her, this is your kindness that you should do for me. In every place wherever we go, say of me, he is my brother. Then Abimelech took sheep, oxen, and male and female servants and gave them to Abraham and restored Sarah his wife to him.
Okay, so here we know this story about Abraham, and this is not the first time that Abraham has done this. Okay, for those of you who've read this about this man's life, and I'm sure most of you have, but we know that previously in chapter 12, that in Egypt he does the same thing. He does the same thing. It's like this was just his way of making things work for himself. Okay, and that's human nature. That's all of us today. We get in a bind, we get in a pinch, and it's like automatically, I'm going to figure this out because I gotta figure this out. I have to make this work. Okay, and so this was his way of making it work, because in those days it wasn't uncommon that, yeah, that's your wife, but now it's mine. Now it's mine. That's how women were treated. Okay, not she, not her, they were treated by a lot of people in those days as property. Okay, and so it was like, yeah, whatever, I'm taking her for myself. Okay, so Abraham is the Old Testament example of a Christian. Okay, in the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul speaks of Abraham and calls him the father of all those who believe or that believe. Okay, the father, we know, we refer to Abraham as the father of our faith. Okay, that he predates the law. Okay, that means that before the law, this man was already paying tithe. Okay, this man, he was offering sacrifices. Okay, he was the one who established the circumcision. Okay, he did these things because he had a real relationship with God. Okay, we're not talking about somebody who was not saved, who had no faith. We're talking about Abraham. Okay, and one thing that can be said about the Bible is, thank God, that it doesn't hide these things. It doesn't sugarcoat the fact that these men, though they were men of faith, and though they are, many of them, men that you and I look up to, men and women that we look up to, they failed at times in life. Okay, I don't believe that this is an accident. We can read the story of Abraham's life and we can be encouraged. You can be encouraged that, yeah, you know, failure, mistakes, falling short, even backslide, you can be redeemed. Okay, there is still hope. Okay, Genesis 20, 2. Yeah, Genesis 20, verse 2. Okay, so here we go. They arrive at this place called Gerar, and they have a plan in place. Okay, this is the plan. Like I said, it didn't really work for him, but it worked for him in Egypt. You know, and this was how he was going to deal with, you know, the possibility of coming into a hostile territory, a hostile civilization, a hostile city. Is, okay, we're going to do this, and what you're going to do is you're going to say you're my sister so they don't kill me and take you from me, which they do anyways. But so Sarah's taken into Abimelech's harem. This isn't the first time that something like this would have happened. Okay, so this is years down the road, like I said, in his relationship with God. Okay, this is, at this point, Sarah is 89 years old. And if you look into this, they're roughly a year away from Sarah becoming pregnant with Isaac. Okay, so you have to understand, you're not talking about a new convert, Abraham. You're not talking about some guy who, you know, this is the first time he's ever read the book of John, you know, and I'm paraphrasing here. Obviously, we know he didn't have the book of John at that time. So, you know, we're not talking about somebody who's new to the faith. Okay, so he's moved forward, you know, he's built altars, he's prayed for Lot to see him spared miraculously from the destruction that took place in Sodom. Okay, he's seen all these things take place. Okay, and you have to remember also that when he did this, when he said, tell him you're my sister, at that point, that was it. That was the plan. There was no plan to get Sarah out of there. There was no plan to fix that situation. If God wasn't working behind the scenes, even though Abraham failed, that was it. Abraham was now going to be without a wife, without a promised heir, a promised son. Okay, if God wasn't working behind the scenes. So this reveals our very limited perspective. Okay, how Abraham looks at this situation, how he reasons, how he's going to deal with what he's facing. Okay, it shows how we can get ourselves into trouble very quickly. Okay, very quickly when we remove God from the equation. Okay, and I'm probably not the only person who could say that's true. I know personally in my own life that when I am going through something, if I take God out and I'm like, I just, you know, and I stop thinking, you know, that somehow that God is in this or that God will help me through this, it's like I start making, okay, this is how I'm going to deal with this is what I'm going to do here. And it's like before I know it, that's not working. And it spirals. Okay, you will spiral downward when you take God out of the equation. Okay, so Genesis 20, 10 through 13. Genesis 20, 10 through 13. I believe I gave that to Manny. Right there.
Okay, I'm reading out a Message Bible. Amalek went to Abraham. Whatever you were thinking of when you did this thing, Abraham said, I just assumed that there was no fear of God in this place and that they'd kill me to get my wife. Besides, the truth is that she is my half-sister. She is my father's daughter, but not my mother's. When God sent me out as a wanderer from my father's home, I told her, do me a favor. Wherever we go, tell the people I am your brother.
Okay. So Abimelech confronts Abraham and he looks at, what are you doing? Why in the world does this make sense to you? Why are you thinking that you're going to tell me this? This is your wife, man. And he's looking at him like, what is going on in your head? Why would you think this makes sense? And he tells him, because I thought that if you thought she was my wife, you would kill me. Okay? He admits then that this has been a dynamic in their marriage for the last 24 years. For the last 24 years, anytime there was going to be, the possibility of some kind of confrontation or this, to save his own skin, it was good. This is what we're going to do, honey. Anytime this happens, okay, this is how we're going to get ourselves out of this situation. Okay, you're just going to tell them you're my sister. They're not going to kill me. They might take you, but hey, you know what? At least we won't be dead. Okay, so, we've seen him do this before. He took matters into his own hands with Hagar and Ishmael. Okay, with what took place in that whole situation. And you see that nevertheless, through all this, God did not stop working in Abraham's behalf because he failed. Okay, we have to find this confidence that God will still work in our lives in spite of our failure. Okay, and moving forward, the second point is that God goes to work even when we fail. And the fact is that we have a very limited perspective. Okay, Abraham knew better. Okay, like I said previously, he had done this before. Okay, this wasn't the first time. Okay, but even when we are not faithful, in 2 Timothy, even when we are not faithful, okay, even when we're faithless, he remains faithful. Okay, he remains faithful. Okay, the Apostle Paul said, I die daily. I have to crucify my flesh. That wretched man he still exists. Okay? That's just the reality. It is a lifelong decision that has to be made. Okay, we're going to need a couple more scriptures as we move forward this morning. Isaiah 55, 8 through 9. Isaiah 55, 8 through 9. Someone could get that for us this morning. Ephraim, if you'll get that. Willie, if you'll get Luke 22, 31, and 32. Luke 22, 31 through 32. Okay, so in this story, you can see Abimelech is the one who comes out looking good in this story. Okay, not Abraham. Okay, God says to Abimelech, I saw your integrity. I saw that you didn't do this to rip Abraham off. You did this because you really believed that this lady, this woman, was his sister. Okay, and he says, because I saw your integrity, I didn't let you touch her. I didn't let you sin. I didn't let you take this further because I saw that. Okay, he did this because he was unaware of the fact that Sarah was Abraham's wife. Okay, Isaiah 55, 8 through 9.
For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts.
Okay. So here is Abraham's perspective, okay? He says, I thought surely that these people don't fear God. Okay, and what he's saying is, I didn't think that God could move here in this circumstance. I didn't think God could move in this situation. I had already made up my mind that these people, they're not going to obey the voice of God. They're not going to do what's right. Okay, that's Abraham's perspective. And here we have Isaiah 55, 8 through 9, and we see that God's perspective is higher than ours. Okay, he sees things totally different than you and I. Okay, when we fail, there's a wrestling that takes place. Okay, when we fail, there's a lot to wrestle through. There's a lot to deal with. There's a lot to wrap our minds around. And it seems like, and it can seem, I should say, like there's no hope when we fail. You got to remember, Abraham didn't have a plan at that point. It was like, my wife's gone, and I guess I'm just going to live my life out here. Okay, he didn't know that behind the scenes, you know, that God had Abimelech up against the wall, smacking him in the face. Telling, you're a dead man. You know, he didn't know that you know, God was going to visit this man in a dream and warn him, hey, look, you've taken someone's wife. Okay, you've done something wrong, and you need to make this right. Because if you don't, it's not going to work out well for you. Okay, but Abraham doesn't see that. Abraham does not know that's taking place. He has no idea that even though he's failed, that God is still moving on his behalf. Okay, when we fail, it's easy to get stuck in the moment. Pastor Ruby, he mentioned a young lady from Stanford a couple years ago. She was a star athlete, young lady, promising future. She was earning a degree also in advanced science, and I guess that in that field there's not a lot of women in the field that she was getting into, so it was a big deal. She was accomplishing quite a bit, but somewhere along the lines, I don't know if it was at a practice or a game in the sport that she was playing, but she got injured. And the injury required rehabilitation. So because, she was competitive, she was driven. She really focused a lot on her rehabilitation, but because of that, her grades started to slip. Okay, and as her grades started to slip, she began to fall into a depression. She began to feel hopeless, like, this is not going to work out, and it continued to spiral downward. And she came to this point where she decided that she was going to call it quits. So she writes a letter, I think, to her family and friends through social media, and then she commits suicide. She finishes it because she looked at what was going on in her life at that point and said, there's no hope here. And, and you and I, we hear this first part of the story. It's like, well, why don't you just pick up and move forward? You've already accomplished so much. You've already done so many great things. I mean, you're a star athlete. I mean, even if you're not a star athlete, you're still obviously brilliant. Focus on school. We look at this, and from our perspective, it's like, no, it's not the end. But when we're the ones stuck in failure, when we're the ones there, it's like, that's it. Hey, there's no moving forward for me. In Genesis 20, 14 through 15, it says, Then Abimelech took sheep, oxen, male and female servants, and gave them to Abraham, and he restored Sarah, his wife, to him. And Abimelech said, See, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you. See, God can turn the whole thing around. Okay, that wasn't supposed to, without God. You have to understand, you take God out of the picture for a second. Okay, and you see that's not how it was supposed to turn out. Okay, that wasn't because Abraham had a good idea and saying, tell them you're my sister. That wasn't because Abraham, that was not a good idea. Okay, it wasn't because of what Abraham did, but it was because behind the scenes, okay, the unseen hand of God was at work. Okay, we have an easier time believing that God will do it when we're righteous. Okay, how many know what I'm talking about this morning? You know, I know for myself that it's like when I'm doing well, when things are going right, you know, I'm doing all this, you know, A, B, C, you know, and everything. Okay, now I know that God will help me. But when we fail, it's like, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that he's going to be at work somehow in that situation or those circumstances to turn things around and still help us. Luke 22, 31 through 32.
And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren.
Okay, you see here, he's letting Peter know that, you know what, look, Satan's coming for you. Okay, and he's going to come for you at a time when things aren't going well in your life. Because we know what's about to take place. You know, Jesus is going to be arrested. He's going to be tried. He's going to be beaten. He's going to be crucified. He's going to die. We know all these things. And Peter's like still, you know, in his mind, he's probably still like, no, we're not going to let that happen. We already know Peter said, no, you're not doing that. So, but Jesus is looking at him and saying, look, you're going to go through some things. You're going to stumble. Okay, there's going to be some things you're going to go through in life. You're going to fail. But you need to know that even through all that, Peter, that I'm praying for you. Okay, that I'm interceding on your behalf. Okay, Peter's faith remained intact, no doubt because of that prayer, because of that intercession, because of what Jesus was doing. Okay? That's what Jesus tells him. But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. That even though, you know, you're gonna screw up, you're gonna make mistakes here, you're gonna do this, but I've prayed, okay, that's not gonna be the end of you, Peter. Okay? We have to leave room for redemption, okay, which is possible, okay, keep in mind, because God doesn't stop working. Okay, the church is still a body and fender shop. Okay, it's still a hospital. Okay, I know, you know, it's easy. It's easy to look around and think that everybody else has it all together except for you, but that's not true. That's not the case. And I'm not telling you to look around at everybody in here and that person's screwed up, that person's a mess. That's not what I'm saying. But you don't need to look at yourself like you're the only one that has problems. Okay, you don't need to believe that. Or if you're somebody who doesn't think you have problems, good for you. Thank God for that. I'm glad that you're doing well. But for those of us who need help, okay, who are still working through things, who are still trying to live this life of faith and realize that, you know what, we're not going to make this on our own. Okay, there's hope. Okay, God is at work. We're going to move forward this morning. Actually, before we move forward, does anybody have any comment or something they want to add this morning? Bertha.
For a temporary situation. You know, once they've done it, I mean, it's done.
Yeah.
And the situation could have changed if they just would have held off.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true for all of us, you know. I mean, how many times have we been through things in life where we thought, you know what, this is probably it. We get caught up in the moment where it's like this isn't going to turn around. The interesting thing, I looked up, sometimes when I'm doing this, I'll look up, like what, studying. I looked up what the name Gerar, which is the place that they traveled to, what it means, and what it means, at least what it said in my concordance, is that word means sojourning. Okay, and for those of you, what that means is passing through. Okay? It's a temporary part of your life. Okay, you're passing through failure. It's temporary. It was not meant to be permanent. Okay, sojourning, that's what it means, is sojourning. Okay, where Abraham and Sarah were, it's just passing through. Okay, and like Bertha just said, that's very true. It's suicide, and ending it it's a permanent solution, and it's not really a solution, but it's a permanent decision for a temporary problem. But moving forward, before we do actually, Willie.
I was just thinking that how many times we don't go to God first before, we decide to do stuff, and it may be on our own. But if Abraham would have gone to God first, he'd have found out those people did fear God, because that's what one of the things Abraham said. I was afraid you didn't fear God, and yet God went and talked to Abimelech, and Abimelech said, "Will you slay a whole righteous nation?" So that tells me those people did fear God, but Abraham didn't know that.
Yeah.
He didn't go to God first to find out. So he used the story that he used before, not checking with God ahead of time. He could have saved a lot of trouble there.
Yeah. Yeah, he could have went that way. He could have went in there and just believed God and still found favor with Abimelech. It didn't have to be, okay, this longer story, now where it's like you have an innocent man in this situation at least, and now he's got God waking him up in the middle of the night, threatening him, because it's like, you don't know what's going on here, Abimelech. You have somebody's wife. Okay, but moving forward, we want to look at the reality that God is working when we are powerless. Okay, there is nothing, like I said earlier, that Abraham could do to change the situation now. He wasn't going to go in there and take Sarah out. He wasn't going to go in there and confront Abimelech. It was too late for all that. Okay, and we find a similar story in Esther with Haman. For those of you who know the story, we know Haman, he's plotting against the Jews, the Israelites, and he's come up with a plan to basically start getting rid of them. Okay, and he does not like Mordecai, because when Haman is appointed, he wants everybody to know that he's been appointed to a new position, and he notices that Mordecai doesn't care. That Mordecai isn't bowing down to him, that Mordecai isn't singing his praise, and it bothers him. And so he's like, well, I'll take care of you. You don't want to show me, that I'm the great. You don't want to show me that I deserve respect. You don't want to respect my position. Well, I'll take care of you. Okay, and so the story goes, that here's the king, and he's unable to sleep, just like Abimelech. Okay, he's unable to sleep, and he begins to look through the records of some things that had taken place recently, and he looks at the record of the assassination attempt that was going to take place on his life. And he sees there that Mordecai was the one who ruined that plot. That Mordecai was the one who brought it to the attention of the guards. He was the one who brought it to the attention of the police. Said, hey, there's going to be an assassination attempt on the king's life. And, the king looks at it, and he comes, and here comes Haman. He's ready. It's morning time, and he's like, all right, I got my plan in place. I'm going to go to the king. I'm going to tell him what Mordecai is doing. I'm going to get this man, and we're going to hang him on those gallows I just built. We're going to take care of this right now. And before he can even get a word out, here comes the king, and he says, I want to know, what did we do for Mordecai? Did we do anything? Or actually what he says is, what should we do? And he doesn't tell him the name. He says, what should we do for this person I want to honor? I want to show someone honor because you know what? They did something really good by me. They helped me out. And Mordecai, he's thinking he's talking about himself, because Haman thinks he's talking about himself because he's delusional, he really thinks really highly of himself. So, this is what we need to do. We need to put him out there, on the king's horse. We need to make it, put him in the Cadillac. We need to make a parade for him. And we need to make this man, everybody needs to know how great this man is. And so the king says, okay, go get Mordecai. Okay? And Haman, Haman's blood is boiling, because he was like, I was just going to kill this guy. I was going to take care of this. But here we see that God was at work. Okay, God was at work. There's this Mordecai, like I said again, just take God out of the picture. Just imagine that God's not intervening in this situation. And it turns out entirely different. Okay, now I know Mordecai's situation, not the same necessarily as Abraham. Abraham, there's some failure on Abraham's part. Mordecai was doing what he needed to be doing. But nevertheless, Mordecai was powerless to stop this from taking place. But because God is at work, even when we're powerless, we see that there is still hope. So, let's see, did I give out? No, I didn't. I know I didn't. So 1 Samuel, I need 1 Samuel 5, 2 through 7. 1 Samuel 5, 2 through 7. Really quick. Ephraim. Get that for us, and then lastly, I will need Psalm 139, 7 through 12. Ed, if you'll get that for us. So before we read this morning, does anybody have any comment or maybe something you just want to share from your own experience?
That's what we need to learn to do when we're going through it, man. It's just one day at a time. Most of us, when we hit these troubled times and these trials, temptations, whatever, we tend to start thinking ahead. We tend to start thinking for the solution rather than just God's timing is God's timing. And remember to put God in it, but sometimes we get frustrated with God's timing because we want it to end now. We want the solution now. We want the answer now. And it's just like that old song says, one day at a time.
Yeah.
One day at a time. Let us learn to take it one day at a time. And when the solution comes, when the answer comes, it's the right answer because it's from God.
Yeah. Tashina.
I think it's going back to Abraham. If you go further to Genesis 26, it also talks about Isaac having the favor. You can see God at work. Isaac did the same mistake, and he was like, he denied his wife as well.
Yeah.
But you could see God at work and the favor right there. God gave him favor. He didn't even realize it himself, Isaac, and Abimelech was the one that said, "Why did you do this?" It's just amazing how you can see it. You see God at work, but you see God, he put a lid on it. You can't see it, but it's amazing the grace and favor.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at this morning, this reality that the hand of God, unseen to us, is at work. Okay, in these circumstances, okay, like I said again, we're looking at men that failed. Okay, and Abraham is just the one that was picked for this whole, but you read the Bible, there's a number of men and women who didn't do the right thing, and yet God was still there. God was still there in his grace. God was still there moving on their behalf, still helping them. He didn't, oh no, it was like, and I just want to say this, I'm not encouraging you to go out and fail, okay? Because after all, God will that's not what I'm saying. Okay, that's not the right attitude. It's not good. That's not good. You don't want to be presumptive. Okay, you don't want to just, assume that God has my back no matter what I do. Okay, that's not a good attitude. Okay, and you'll get yourself into trouble like that. Okay, so that's not what we're talking about this morning. But we are looking at the reality that failure is a part of our lives. Okay, failing, it happens. Okay, so 1 Samuel 5, 2 through 7.
When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon, fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it in its place again. And when they arose early the next morning, there was Dagon, fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. The head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. Therefore, neither the priests of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us, and Dagon our God.
Okay, so for the backstory here, you have what's taking place in Israel at the time. The priest, his name is Eli. Okay, he's not doing what he needs to be doing. He has two sons who are exceedingly wicked. Okay, they're not repentant whatsoever. If you read the story, you see that these two young men, they're over here sleeping with the women that come into the church. They come into the temple. Okay, they're doing all kinds of things, and that's not it. That's not the end of their wickedness. There's a lot going on there. Okay, and God looks at all this taking place. He says, that's enough. Okay, that's enough. We're not doing this anymore. This is not the way that we're going to be doing things in Israel. Okay, and he says, he basically lets them know, or I should say, lets Samuel know, look, that this is what's going to happen. Okay, I'm going to step in because I can't continue to put up with this. Okay, so now they're at war with the Philistines, and they're not doing well. They're losing, and so they have this brilliant idea. You know what? We're going to go get the ark. We're going to bring the ark down here, and you know what? And God's going to help us. God's going to step in, and He's going to fight for us. Remember what I said about being presumptive? Okay, you don't want to do that. Okay, I'm going to do whatever I want, and still God's going to help me. Don't have that attitude. Okay, but we see that the story goes forward. They take the ark. The Philistines defeat the Israelites. They take the ark. Okay, Eli and his sons, his sons die. Eli finds out. He hears word. Eli falls to his death. His daughter-in-law gives birth to a child that she names him Ichabod, meaning the glory has departed. And what they're talking about is the fact that the Ark of the Covenant has been taken away. Okay, the presence of God, that's been removed. Okay, so we see that there's some failure taking place right now in the nation of Israel. But behind the scenes, what these people see is God's not with us anymore. And here, they don't know that the ark has been taken into the temple of Dagon, and that what's taking place in there is God is defeating, He's smacking them around. Okay, He's fighting on their behalf. Okay, now we know that, that there's obviously the reality that God doesn't share, a house. Okay, that's what got Israel in trouble in the first place, because there was all this other stuff going on in the temple. Okay, there was these other things that were taking place, but God is not a respecter of Dagon. He's not a respecter of the Philistines. He's not even though all this has taken place, they've failed. They've lost the ark, but here you have to see this, that God is still at work. Okay, it's not going the way that they think it is. What they see, no doubt, they're probably looking, and they're like, oh, we really screwed this up. We really messed this one up. Okay, the ark has been taken. We've lost the battle to the Philistines. Now now we have nothing. Now we have nothing, but behind the scenes, God is moving and making things right. Okay, he's taking what should have been a failure and he's turning it around. Okay, they were powerless, though. You have to understand, again, like I said, we're looking at the reality that God is still moving even when we are powerless. Okay, and that's easy to feel that way at times in life, that there's nothing you can do to fix this. Okay, and the reality is, a lot of time when we fail, there really isn't anything we could do to fix it. Okay, that's the truth, okay? But you have to understand that God is still at work, okay? Meanwhile, okay, the children of Israel no doubt feel like absolute failures, but they don't know behind the scenes that God is defeating their conquerors, okay, that he's bringing the Philistines to their knees. It says that they were afflicted with tumors. If you look what that is, it's hemorrhoids. So you got to imagine how that was going for them. Okay, it wasn't going well. And it brings them to their knees. They're like, hey, you know what? We need to get this thing back. Give it back. We don't want it. Okay? Get it out of here. Get it out of here, because this is terrible. This is terrible, okay? So Psalm 139, 7 through 12.
Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as day. The darkness and light are both alike to you.
Okay, so here we have David, and he's talking about God working in his life. Okay, and he has this revelation, through the good times in his life, the high points in his life, that God has been there. And then he also sees this other side, that when I make my bed in hell, if I decide that I'm just going to go and, if I'm going to go and make a mess of things, if I'm going to go and I'm going to go live in sin, I'm going to tell you, you get saved, you know what I'm talking about. After you get saved, sin is not the same. After you get saved, you know what I'm talking about. If you try to live the way that you used to live, there is this just disgusting taste that sin comes with now. Yeah, whatever, you might feel all right for a little bit. You whatever. But all at the same time, there is this conviction that is unavoidable. Okay, and what he's saying here is, look, when I make my bed in hell, you're there. When I fail, when I make a mess, when I think, you know what, I'm just going to cash it in and give up, whatever, you're there. And he's looking at his life, and he's realizing, that God is at work when things are going good, and that God is at work when things are not going good, when things are not looking favorable, when there is failure. Okay, that's what we're looking at this morning. When there is failure, you are still there. Okay, God can save those who you might think, or who we might think, or if you think this about yourself, that are, we think that God can't save those people. They're beyond. No, God can save those who think they're beyond saving. Okay, God can save those who we might think, you know what? I don't think they're going to get saved. I've witnessed to them. I don't know what, if anything's going on, but you have to understand that behind the scenes, I know, like in my own life, that this is true, and I've talked to other people who backslid. At the time, you're watching them do these things, and you're like, do you even, is there anything even, conviction? Is there anything going on? And later on, you find out that there was. that God was dealing with them. Even when they were making decisions to turn their back on God, God was dealing with them. Okay, and that's what you have to realize, that is what he's saying. Where can I go from your spirit? That's what he starts this off with. Where can I flee? Where am I going to go where I don't see your hand at work? And he says, nowhere. Nowhere. I could flee. I could dwell, as he says, in the uttermost parts of the sea. I could go live up there in the canals. And there you are. Or if you prefer, you can go live out there in the desert. I personally don't like the desert, but here we are, stuck in the desert. But you know, that's just the reality, okay? That's what we're looking at this morning, okay? That we serve a God that is a way maker, and that he is even there, and he's moving, and he's with us even in failure. Okay? So before we wrap it up this morning, does anybody have any comment or anything? Annie.
And it says, God's divine providence in the idea that God is involved in the universe and guides all that happens, God's plan and purpose for the world, including everyday things and extraordinary events.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it's like if you take a look right now, you have to realize that in the world, we have the capability to like nearly destroy the world. Okay, you have Russia with all of its nuclear armament. You have America with all of our capability, and we know that men can be foolish. Men have done some dumb things throughout history, and you have to ask yourself, well, what is it that's holding all those things back from taking place? It's not our wisdom, okay, and it's not our hand, okay? You have to realize that it's God. Okay, God is at work behind the scenes, amen. So we're going to go on ahead and wrap this up this morning, and thank you. We're going to get started here about 5 minutes.